Hola, jo sóc n'Eulàlia Febrer, d'Electronic Dojo. Avui, a Gamesound, abordarem un aspecte referent als videojocs que ha estat deixat de costat en nombroses ocasions, però que afortunadament comença a tenir més pes i rellevància dins del sector. Parlem de l'accessibilitat de les propostes a persones amb diferents habilitats. Gran part dels avanços que trobem es deuen a la feina d'associacions com a la que pertany el nostre pròxim convidat, Steve Sayler, que s'apoda ell mateix el jugador cec. Steve pertany a l'associació canadenca Can I Play That i ens parlarà de la seva feina d'assessoria per al videojoc The Last of Us Part 2 de Naughty Dog. Ens parlarà de la seva experiència en diferents jocs i de les diferents opcions que han anat apareixent en el mercat durant els últims anys, sobretot per permetre l'accés al sector d'un públic més ampli. Específicament, avui ens mostrarà les opcions de guia auditiva que introdueix el joc per persones invidents. Si no coneixeu aquestes opcions, no us ho podeu perdre. Comencem! Welcome, Steve. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure for us too. Thank you for your time, and let me introduce you in Spanish. Bueno, Steve es asesor de accesibilidad a videojuegos. Ha sido creador de contenido durante más de 15 años. También dirige un podcast en Toronto, participa en programas de radio, es streamer, hace 80.000 cosas y todo esto siendo invidente. Así que es un auténtico crack. So thank you, Steve. Now we start with your talk. I have nothing else to add, so I give you the floor.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Laura. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be able to talk to all of you. I apologize. I don't speak Spanish. I live in Canada, so basically the only two languages I know is French and English. So I hope my my English will be okay for you all. So essentially today I'm going to be chatting about accessibility and a little bit of Last of Us, which you'll understand why in a second. And also I do have an embarrassing childhood photo that I'm going to be sharing with you today. That it will all tie in. I promise. But first, I'm going to show you a video that was actually done recently for the Super Bowl in 2019, and I figure it's probably a good idea to be able to start off with that, and kind of that'll lead into the talk today. So here we go.
It's a little challenging, but that's the whole point of gaming. I can hit the buttons just as fast as they can, and I think I can crush my friends.
No matter how your body is or how fast you are, you can play. It's a really good thing to have in this world.
So that video it was, like I said, part of the Super Bowl in 2019. It was an ad done by Microsoft for promoting their Xbox Adaptive Controller, and this kind of leads into the title of my talk today, which is essentially when everybody plays, we all win. In the accessibility community, this is something that we have really taken to heart, and it's something that we promote actively because as disabled players, there are a lot of games that we're not able to play. And it's kind of unfortunate when our friends are playing a lot of games like Assassin's Creed or Warzone, or even more of the Call of Duty games, and we're not able to play it, but our friends are, and they're able to enjoy it. And it kind of feels like we're a bit left out. So Microsoft kind of put out this phrase that when everybody plays, we all win, so that it kind of encompasses everybody. It's all about inclusivity. And I'm going to be talking about a little bit about kind of like some of the common accessibility barriers that you may not know are accessibility barriers in video games that will actually that you may be able to help sort of spread the word about, like, okay, this is something that you can actively kind of look for, and hopefully today you'll be inspired to chat about accessibility with your friends and family and those you play with. But first, before we get into that, a little bit about me. Hi, I'm Steve Sayler. I'm blind and I play video games. I start that off with pretty much every video and every sort of stream I do, because that essentially sums up exactly who I am. But I'm a accessibility advocate. I'm an accessibility consultant. I've consulted with studios such as Ubisoft and EA, and most recently Naughty Dog for The Last of Us Part 2. This is a photo of myself and a few of the developers and other consultants at Naughty Dog when we were playtesting the game. And I'm very honored to be one one of the 7 consultants that was asked to be able to create the accessibility for this game, because it actually really does move the bar forward and move the standard forward when it comes to accessibility. If you may not know, The Last of Us Part 2, developed by Naughty Dog and Sony for the PlayStation 4, it was touted as having an amazing array of over 60 plus accessibility settings. And that, it may seem not like, well, I mean, there's a lot of settings in games anyway. Like, I don't understand kind of why that would be significant. To kind of put in perspective, several years before, like even last year, there were several large games that came out that had maybe 10 accessibility settings, if that. And so this really kind of set the bar really high. And obviously it was something that was put in the mainstream. You might have seen a video of me crying on the internet because of accessibility settings, which is totally fine. But it garnered a lot of mainstream press in the BBC, CNN, USA Today, and including a lot of gaming sites like IGN and GameSpot, and the CBC in my home country in Canada. So I'm really proud of the work that we did, and we'll be talking a little bit, somewhat in detail, of the settings that we were kind of helped sort of create with the developers at Naughty Dog for The Last of Us Part 2. But to take it all the way back, this is me as a kid. I am kind of a bit embarrassed of this photo because for some reason, I don't know, like I don't like my parents for giving me these types of glasses. I just remember for about a year and a half, I essentially was looking through rose-colored glasses, and all I could see was orange and purple. And it was fine, but this is basically around the time when I really started getting into video games. But the problem was that a lot of video games really were like hard for me to play. And I used to think that I actually sucked at video games. And I would watch my brother play more often than not. So a lot of the games that I kind of grew up with, that I'm familiar with, wasn't something that I played. It was actually something that I watched. And that's kind of when sort of the YouTube Let's Play genre from people like PewDiePie and Markiplier, and then obviously like all the streaming people we see on Twitch for games, that was something that I gravitated towards because that's something that I did as a kid. And then kind of like jump way forward, I essentially, in my teenage years and into my early 20s, like I was a casual gamer at best, because I used to always tell myself that I just suck at video games. Like, yeah, I'm blind. I can play video games, but I'm like, I just could not play the same level that my friends were playing. And then about 2015, I was sort of talking around with my friends, and I decided to be able to come up with this sort of YouTube channel idea called Blind Gamer, where essentially I kept telling my friends for years I sucked at video games, and I just wanted to show them proof of that. And this was actually me, where I actually was recording one of the very first episodes of Blind Gamer. I had some friends who had all the consoles and all the recording equipment, and they helped me be able to set it up and allow me to start my channel. And since then, I was getting into Let's Play genre. I was sort of a niche Let's Player on YouTube. I was kind of more doing it for entertainment purposes and not necessarily thinking about accessibility really at all. And then about 2 years later, in 2017, I was invited to be on a panel at Ubisoft. They had like this Game UX Summit in Toronto, where I live, and they dedicated a whole panel about accessibility, and they asked me to be in it. I wasn't a developer. I wasn't really into consulting or advocacy at that point. I just sort of felt like that I was, oh, great, I'm the only gamer in the room or the YouTuber in a room full of developers from so many different studios, from indie to AAA. And I was like, I get to sort of talk to these developers directly. That's really cool. And it wasn't until I essentially was on stage here, this is not the exact moment in this photo, but it's around this time. It was literally in the middle of that panel that I had a realization and an epiphany that essentially it wasn't that I told myself for years I sucked at video games. It wasn't that I sucked at video games. It's that video games sucked for me. And right then and there, that's when sort of my accessibility journey started. And actually, in this photo, is very interesting because the woman I'm sitting beside in the white button-up shirt is actually Alex Nianiki. She was the concept artist for The Last of Us Part 2. She works at Naughty Dog, but she was responsible for a lot of the accessibility in Uncharted 4. So this is kind of very a full circle that essentially this is kind of where my journey had started with being able to talk to people at Naughty Dog. So that's kind of me in a nutshell, and kind of leading to now. I essentially am, like I said, an advocate and a consultant. I'm also the media editor for caniplaythat.com, which is a website all dedicated to reviewing video games from an accessibility standpoint. And yeah, so what I'm going to be talking about today is essentially common accessibility barriers, things that you may have sort of known about to a certain degree, or you, at least in games that you play, but you haven't really sort of known about that could be issues with accessibility, and for those who are disabled. So I'm going to kind of go through a few. And of course, this being the Gamesound project, I will be kind of talking about some of the difficulties for blind players when they need to rely on sound and music in order to be able to know how to play. So first off, I want another first common accessibility barrier is complex menus. That's something that like, okay, that's kind of seems very broad in general, but for someone who's like blind like myself, or just has a cognitive disability, or even motor disability, being able to navigate menus is so difficult. I kind of use example as a bad example of this is The Witcher 3. Oh, this is a very well reviewed game. This is something that a lot of people love and played, and is some of the people's favorite game of all time. But in this, and you may think, okay, this is a little bit, there's a lot of text here, but you may not think that that's necessarily an issue. But for someone like myself, this is how I see the game. It's small. It's very very blurry. It's hard for me to be able to look at the text and read it. For this game, I actually had to stop playing because there would be many times I had to get like within centimeters from the screen just so that I can be able to read what was on the screen and read what I was supposed to be doing. And to kind of use it as a good example, this is actually leading into this is the accessibility menu, or part of the accessibility menu in The Last of Us Part 2. And this is something that Naughty Dog was able to do to kind of combat the complex menus. They created these presets. There's obviously, like I said, there are about 60 accessibility options in Last of Us Part 2, but that's a lot to be able to like go through each one and enable. So they created these presets for vision accessibility, for hearing accessibility, and for motor accessibility, and it turns on every single option that would be available. And for someone who is blind, that like this preset is amazing, because here I'll show you actually a video. This is kind of what it sounds like for blind players when they're trying to be able to play the game.
Square button, scan for enemies. Circle button, scan for items.
So that's kind of one example of kind of just the enhanced listen mode and audio cues and text to speech. And this is done through all the menus in the game, where you can be able to, like, you have a narrator that essentially reads the text for you, so you don't have to worry about it. And they also have the sort of the UI or game interface a lot easier for blind players to be able to at least hear what options are available to them. Here's another example using an audio cue that I really, really love in how immersive this experience can be for players. And I'll explain a little bit in a second, but here we go.
Who do you used to do this route with? Jesse? Eugene. Right. Ah, Eugene. Man, he was funny. Oh, yeah.
Plus, he taught me about rewiring electronics and stuff.
Maybe I'll be that sharp in 73. Maybe I'll make it to 73.
sign us in.
What was this place?
It used to be a radio tower. No sign of infected. Or non-infected, for that matter. Come here. Town up ahead's our last stop. Take a look.
So that is an example of of just how immersive sound can be, especially for someone like myself as a blind player, or even those who are on the kind of further end of the like blindness spectrum, where they don't have any sight. You can, if you noticed in the sound alone, you can hear every single bit of sound effect, whether it's Dina climbing up a rope, or opening a door, or opening a drawer, and you can also hear the audio cues of items and things you can interact with for nearby. But what's also great too is that the audio cues have the ability to let you know which button to push, but then also have a sound effect preceding that lets you know what item you're going to be interacting with. So in this particular example, you can hear the sound for pushing the X button, and then you hear a rope sound effects, letting you as a player know that you can be able to interact with a rope and you'll be able to climb up it. And that's something that Naughty Dog was able to create, this sort of immersive experience that kind of helped sort of eliminate the complexity of having to be able to look at a HUD or the menus in order to be able to kind of know what to do. They really kind of took a lot of care into making that a really amazing experience. And I like to be able to say, like, you can be able to play this game with basically blindfolded, and it's something that is really amazing, and no game has really been able to do that. There have been audio games, but this is the first time a AAA game of this magnitude was able to create something that was completely playable and completable by sightless players. I know several of my friends who have been able to play this game and complete it from beginning to end without any sight whatsoever, and it was still challenging for them to be able to play. Now that's just getting into complex menus, but another issue that there is a common accessibility barrier is essentially remappable controls, and I kind of use Assassin's Creed as an example because it's like, this is the controls for Assassin's Creed Black Flag. I know a lot of people love it, but for me personally, even like myself, who doesn't have a motor disability, this is actually really difficult to be able to play. Essentially, my hand kind of turns into this claw every time I play it. But for those who have a motor disability, that could be extremely difficult if you can only be able to hold a controller with one hand, or you can barely even push any of the buttons at all. So here's an example of kind of what The Last of Us was able to do in this situation. So as you can see, there's the ability to change it so you can be able to play with the controller upside down or left-handed, and you can be able to remap every single control that is available, and you can set it to however you want. Now, this doesn't sort of fix the issue with regards to hardware accessibility. That's kind of where Sony is a bit lacking in that if you can't hold a PlayStation controller, it'd be really difficult for you to be able to play. But that's where on Xbox side, on Microsoft side, that's where the adaptive controller comes in. This device right here allows players with motor disabilities to be able to not only be able to use this controller to play the game, but you can be able to connect on the back of the controller. There are these little basically microphone or like headphone ports that can connect buttons and switches and toggles or even thumbsticks that will allow disabled players to be able to play. And what's even great too is because with Microsoft, it has the ability to be able to use Copilot, which allows another player to be able to play along with you, and you can share a controller essentially. So your friend can be able to play with an irregular Xbox controller, and have your friend basically play with the adaptive controller, and you can sort of remap the controls that way, so that in a racing game, your friend can be controlling the steering of the car, whereas with these two big buttons on the adaptive controller, you as someone with motor disability can be able to handle the brake and acceleration, and the two of you can be able to work together to be able to make to be able to play this game and have an enjoyable experience. Another sort of a common accessibility barrier is preset difficulty. This is something that has come up quite often, especially most recently with this game right here, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. This game came out last year, and it's from Software, and there is no sort of difficulty settings you can be able to, like you see in games where you have easy, normal, and hard. It's just one preset difficulty, and for a lot of disabled players, it's really hard to be able to play those games, and it's even harder because you may have some barriers that are in the way. And having a preset difficulty really limits anybody to be able, like everybody can be able to play. And that's the thing with sort of game developers, is that it's not about necessarily like they want to be able to have everyone play their game. And I get that sort of people think, oh, it's just they're just going with artistic vision. From Software has created many games that are extremely hard, but it's not about that. Accessibility shouldn't be a compromise to your artistic vision, because the more players can be able to play this game, they can possibly be able to find their favorite game of all time. And unfortunately, even with the announcement that just recently that Sekiro is not adding any new accessibility features into the game with its new update, that's also kind of a really sad to be able to see that even still with this game, even with the large sort of debate and conversation that was happening last year with this game, that even still they weren't able to take the time to be able to add that in. It's still possible, but like with the recent announcement, I don't think that that's something they've been working on for the past year. It kind of going back to The Last of Us Part 2, what I really love what they did to tackle preset difficulty is that they had the same sort of like difficulty settings that they had in the previous game, with easy, normal, like moderate, survivor, hard, and that could work. But what's great too is that you can customize to your own difficulty setting. So if you're like, you know what, I don't really do well in stealth situations, so I'm going to set that to sort of, I want to set that to like the easiest mode, but I still really want that challenge of being able to like the enemies are much more harder to be able to hit than me. So you can be able to really customize how you want to be able to play it. So you can be able to adjust difficulty for you as the player, the enemies, your allies, a little bit more like easier to hit or easier to be able to take people out, stealth wise, and resources. Like there's more, adds more resources or takes away resources in the game. So there's really you can create your own custom difficulty, and that's something that we encourage developers to be able to do, because it's something that that is really, it allows more people to be able to play, and it also still kind of creates that challenge for disabled players. Like even for myself, even playing this game, even though I kind of set it to a little bit more of an easier setting, it still was a challenge for me to be able to play. And that's something that we still want. We don't want the game to be easy for easy's sake. We want the game to just be able to be playable, and kind of help remove some barriers. Another sort of common accessibility barriers is subtitles. For those who are deaf and hard of hearing, where sound and music is really difficult for, how do you sort of attack that as a barrier when a lot of games sort of use sound in order to be able to communicate. A really bad example of this actually was just recently, as you can see here, Spyro, when it was remastered with the Reimagined trilogy, the developers actually were famously or infamously kind of came out and said there is no industry standard for subtitles, and that is actually false. There is an industry standard, and there actually is a really great way to be able to do it. And their reasoning for not adding subtitles in the remastered trilogy, even though they had to basically build the game from the ground up, they thought it was taking away from the original experience, even when the original experience didn't have accessibility, because accessibility wasn't talked about at that point. They still decided to not include it because they wanted to keep it as original to the artistic vision as possible. Now, because this actually kind of blew up online, they did add subtitles back in, or at least created subtitles, and they essentially were able to get that fixed. But it's sort of like the damage kind of had already been done. And great examples of how like subtitles could be able to work in games. Here's an example of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Ubisoft was widely praised for its subtitles and the fact that they had it on by default, and you had the ability to be able to add speaker tags to whoever's speaking. You can have a transparent or opaque or semi-transparent background for the subtitles. The text was really large and readable, which is something that like the Assassin's Creed series didn't really have a lot of great track record for before. Like famously, the first Assassin's Creed game didn't even have subtitles whatsoever. And to see that how far they've come, they actually did. There was recently that they actually, because they set it on by subtitles on by default, over 95% of players who started with the game with subtitles on kept it on, and that just kind of goes to show you how much adoption can be made if you just sort of allow the player customization and even just add things by default, which is something that we don't as disabled players can be really difficult to do. It's like, okay, do we have to go into the settings to sort of and like turn these things on? Are these things even available? So it's great that Ubisoft was able to kind of add that, start the game up by default. Obviously, going back to The Last of Us, they actually really even pushed subtitles even further. Here's a great example of it. This shows all the customization options for the subtitles in the game, from text size to text color to even speaker tags. What's really cool here, you can see this little arrow beside the subtitle that tells you exactly where the sound is coming from. And there's so many different ways that sound was able to be kind of conveyed with a visual element. There's sound effects that's kind of like sort of play and there's a visual indicator of that. It's really kind of creates a visualization of sound that for deaf and hard of hearing players are able to still play the game and enjoy it without having to worry about, wait, what was that being said? What, like, is there an enemy behind me? Or like I can't see it because but I can, like, if you can hear it, it's like, well, they may not be able to be on screen, so that might be difficult for them to be able to see. So the question essentially, what does this all break down to? Like we've talked about sort of the accessibility barriers and sort of the settings that are in different games, and some good and some bad. But kind of what, like my motto when it comes to accessibility is all settings are accessibility. Every single bit of setting that allows you to customize the game to make it a lot more comfortable and barrier-less for you to be able to play is awesome. And we should have more customization in settings instead of just being locked into necessarily an accessibility menu. That's great for disabled players, because at least if there's an accessibility menu, we can see what's available and what we can be able to use as disabled players. But we sort of see it as, like, we would love to be able to see it as more of a filter where all these same settings can be found in other settings menus, such as gameplay, audio, video, controls, that all the kind of common menus that you see in games. And because one of the things that I learned about with The Last of Us 2 after it was released was that I had a lot of my friends who were playing this that are not disabled, but they found some of the accessibility settings that were like, I never knew that this was something that I always struggled with, but I can be fixed with these accessibility options. Whether it's trying to be able to find items to be able to to be able to collect in the game, or just being able to read text so that they don't necessarily have to lean in super close because they're sitting in a couch 5 to 6 feet away on a smaller TV. So that's something that I like to be able to kind of promote, is that literally all settings can be accessibility. Now, you may be wondering, okay, I'm not a developer. I'm a gamer. I love video games and I love playing them. How can, like, but I will love accessibility and I want to be able to talk about accessibility. How can I sort of get involved? Well, there are certain things you can be able to do. You can talk to the community. There's an amazing accessibility community that can allow you to get involved in conversations happening online, support developers and companies that are pushing accessibility forward, like Naughty Dog, like Ubisoft, Square Enix, and like even some of the smaller titles, like for the developers for Celeste was able to create an amazing assist mode that became a really a great thing for accessibility. So there's a lot of developers that are adding that in, and actively promoting it can get their work out there and basically show developers, like, okay, there's an interest in this. We should keep adding these into our projects. Another thing you can do is talk to disabled gamers. Able Gamers is a great organization. It's a charity that helps disabled players to be able to get access to hardware and controllers that allow them to be able to play. They can also have a resources for developers to be able to kind of add accessibility options in the game. They have courses and stuff like that. CanIPlayThat.com, which is a slight plug, is where I'm a part of, and we review video games from accessibility standpoint. But we also have commentary pieces about the industry with regards to accessibility. But we also report on news that's happening in accessibility. So I definitely recommend checking that site out. Or there's other accessibility advocates like myself, and I have a few resources that I'll show in a sec that you can be able to screenshot if you want to be able to follow a few people there. Another thing also is start early, is start now. The more voices that are out there talking about accessibility, the more information can be gathered. The more people are talking about it, the louder our voices become, and it's something that the industry can't ignore. The Last of Us was great because it basically opened the door wide open for accessibility, but we still got to keep pushing that forward, because it's gonna be a few years until we see the impact of what The Last of Us has done within the video game development industry. So we want to be able to keep actively promoting and trying to be able to push for more accessibility in games, so that blind players can be able to play with just sound and music. Deaf and hard hearing players can be able to play with being able to have visualization of sound. Motor disabilities can be able to play with whatever controller that's put in front of them. They can be able to customize however they wish. If you want to be able to sort of talk or connect with a few resources, here's a few people that I would recommend connecting to on Twitter. There's Cherry Ray Thompson, and it was accessibility project manager along with David Tisserand. At Ubisoft, there's Ian Hamilton, he's creator of Game Accessibility Guidelines.com. EA_Accessibles, Karen Stevens. She works specifically on EA Sports for accessibility. CanIPlayThat.com. Able Gamers, and also Steven Spahn, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Able Gamers. So if you want to screenshot that, I would definitely recommend at least checking those people out, because we actively talk about accessibility, and it's a way to kind of at least give you some knowledge about what is available and what is going to be coming up. So that's basically a bit about me. If you want to be able to follow me, stevesayler.net for some of my professional stuff, at Steve Sayler on Twitter, or my YouTube channel, youtube.com/snowball, where I do videos and I do give impressions about games that are coming up that from an accessibility standpoint. And like I said before, CanIPlayThat.com, which is the site that I'm a part of, and I definitely recommend checking that out. So yeah, that's basically it for me. And I think that I'm ready for any questions that you may have. And I just want to say, just before we even start, thank you so much for having me. I hope this was information was great, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed it.
It was great talk, super interesting. You are such an inspiration fighting for accessibility in video games, so thank you very much. It's amazing, your work, it's amazing, really.
Oh, thank you so much.
So I have two questions. How do you experience the sound of different objects in video games and in real life?
So in The Last of Us, there actually is like things you can build, like obviously, like I said, there's audio cues you can be able to interact with. But a lot of times in games, that's not necessarily something that is available. Obviously, Last of Us did a really great job with being able to use sound for things you can be able to interact with. I've even had some games where they use sort of haptic feedback in the vibration of the controller to let you know that there's something you can interact with. It's kind of difficult because blindness is such a spectrum that there's not like one sort of setting that sort of fits all people with who are blindness, whether they have no sight or even just are considered who are legally blind or low vision. So it can be difficult. Sound can be a really amazing tool when done well for accessibility, because the more sound and more things that you can be able to, like audio cues and a glossary or just being able to interact with stuff is amazing for blind players, because just that can help us be able to be more immersed in the world that we all enjoy.
Right. So my second question is, there's a lot of people with different abilities who may have not ventured into video games, maybe because they find it to be a frustrating experience. What would you like to say to them so they can put their fears aside and adventure into the fantastic worlds that video games have to offer?
Well, it's I love that people want to be able to get into video games, and I completely understand the frustration of trying to, like, you purchase a game and you want to be able to play it, and you find that for whatever reason, there's nothing available to them. I definitely recommend a great way to be able to find games that are accessible. Like I said, is caniplaythat.com. We have a large sort of catalog of games that we've reviewed from different sort of disability aspects that will allow them to be able to kind of see what games are available. I also recommend, if you're a little bit worried about spending the money to find games that would be accessible for you, I think Xbox Game Pass is an absolutely amazing service, because yes, it's a certain amount of that you're paying per month as a subscription, but what's amazing is that there's over 100 plus games that are on there that you can download, try it out, and if it doesn't work for you, you can easily delete it and try a different one, and it's no
nice.
loss of funds to you. It's a great way to be able to demo games that you may not have had a chance to be able to try before. Like even this summer, they had the Summer Game Fest. They had over 70 plus demos of games you can just sort of pick and choose and download and play, all via on Game Pass. And all you needed was a Game Pass Ultimate account, and you're able to download these and try out these games. And so I would definitely recommend if you have an Xbox or even a PC, like Game Pass is also available on PC as well.
Right.
And I definitely recommend trying that out. If you want to jump in, but you're like, I don't want to spend a huge amount of money on it, this is a great way to be able to start. And obviously, I think even the first month now, you can get it for like $1. So you can try out a bunch of different games for like the first 30 days for like $1 or €1 or whichever currency that you have.
That was great advice. So thank you very much for your time, and see you the next time. So goodbye, Steve. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Bye bye. It was a pleasure for us too.
Gràcies a propostes com The Last of Us 2 i a la feina d'associacions com Can I Play That, comptem cada dia amb una major conscienciació al voltant de la necessitat de crear opcions de joc inclusives. Steve ens ha mostrat algunes de les opcions que poden fer la vida més fàcil a alguns jugadors i ampliar de forma significativa l'abastiment i les possibilitats del món audiovisual interactiu, com en aquest cas seria el dels videojocs. Vosaltres, quines opcions de joc creieu que s'haurien de desenvolupar per crear un sector més inclusiu? Ens ho podeu fer saber a través de Twitter emprant el hashtag Gamesound. No us oblideu de seguir Electronic Dojo a Twitter, Instagram i Facebook a partir dels enllaços que apareixen a la pantalla. Ens veiem a la propera càpsula amb més música i més videojocs. Fins aviat!